I love trying to figure out who's going to be the next fighter in Smash Ultimate. There are so many characters that fans want to see join the battle, but the problem is there are only so many of those requests that can be fulfilled. The roster of Smash Ultimate is stacked as it is, with an ARMS character coming and 5 more on top of what we've already got, but the fanbase will likely never stop speculating because of just how passionate they are about the series. Now, many fans, including myself at times, like to focus their speculation on a series that doesn't currently have a fighter, but today I wanted to focus on ones that do. As a fun challenge, I wanted to examine every series with a playable character in Smash and pick just one more from each that would be an interesting addition to the roster. Now, I'm definitely not pretending that this is a realistic thing to happen. After all, the likelihood of us getting another Earthbound rep, for example, is slim to none. But if it was to happen, who would be one that I personally want? And if that character is a little bit more obscure, who do I think Nintendo is more likely to add from that series? And one last thing, I'm going to be excluding a few of the franchises that aren't really series, and they'll be shown on screen now. There's no point in wasting your time discussing games that realistically don't have any other character to include in Smash besides the one that's already in. For example, there isn't really any character to include from Wii Fit besides the trainer, hence why I'm not focusing on it today. I'm definitely glad that these series have characters in Smash, but they don't really have any more to offer. But for every actual series in the game, I think it's time that we find out what would happen if we gave every one of them one more fighter. We're gonna have to be pretty concise with each series today because we've obviously got a lot to cover, and first up in series order is Super Mario. I know everyone has been dying for a new Mario rep because we've not really gotten many of them over the years. It's very underrepresented, and honestly the only series that I think gets more requests for new additions is probably Fire Emblem, and justifiably so. But we'll tackle that beast a little bit later on. I wonder how many people just clicked off of the video. I kid, obviously, but if Mario was to get a new fighter in Smash, which one would I like to see added the most? There are obviously many ideas here. Captain Toad, for example, would be a great and unique pick, and I covered a possibility for his moveset on a recent edition of my Smash Concept series. But there are several others as well. Paper Mario, Geno, Birdo as an Echo Fighter for Yoshi, so many others, and it really just shows the massive depth that the Mario series can boast. It's almost unparalleled, and there aren't many bad options here, but I've just got to go with a personal pick here, one that I'd love to see the most. He's had a great underdog story. Waluigi is my pick. It'd be such a great feeling if he makes it into the roster of Smash, because regardless of what character it is, it'll prove without a shadow of a doubt that if you have enough fan support and enough people clamoring for your inclusion in Smash, it can happen. If I was to go with the more likely pick from Nintendo's side of things, I think Paper Mario would be their choice, and I definitely think that there's potential for a great Paper Mario moveset, but I'd go with Waluigi personally. Next up is the Donkey Kong franchise, and my pick for a new fighter is Dixie Kong. Now, Dixie would likely be either a pseudo-clone or a full-on Echo Fighter of Diddy Kong, but that's okay. This may not necessarily be a bad thing, considering that Dixie Kong is a very popular and highly requested character from fans, including myself. And Echo Fighters being introduced in Smash Ultimate is just a great way to include more faces that people want to see without putting as much uniqueness into their moveset. And Dixie doesn't really need too much uniqueness. It's just her presence that would make people happy. Now, Funky Kong could work as a pretty fun fighter as well, but like Dixie would also be an Echo Fighter, instead this time being an Echo Fighter of Donkey Kong. It's just up to your personal preference on which one of them could be included. My personal preference happens to be Dixie Kong, and I think Nintendo would be more likely to include her as well. Next up, we have The Legend of Zelda. Now, some say Ganon should be the pick here for a new Zelda character, and I agree that it would be a great idea, but at the same time, one of the biggest criticisms from the Zelda fanbase to the Smash roster is the fact that literally every character in the roster is already some form of Link, Zelda, or Ganondorf. Oh, sorry for those Ocarina spoilers, by the way. So this is why I'm deciding to pick Skull Kid. There are obviously many great options available, but the point of this video is to pick just one, right? Skull Kid being included would add a very unique villain that isn't part of the Triforce into Smash. Isn't that good enough? Skull Kid's an extremely popular character, and I think there is a decent chance that Nintendo would pick him to be included. Unless there's some villain from a newer Zelda game that ends up being more popular. Next up is Metroid, and my pick is Psylocke. Psylocke, for those of you who are unaware, is one of the 7 hunters in Metroid Prime Hunters on the DS. And since that appearance, he's kind of been teased as a very important figure in Metroid Prime 3, and Metroid Prime Federation Force, you know, everybody's favorite game. Psylocke is considered to be a sworn enemy of Samus and the Galactic Federation, and it would make sense to include a character who will likely be the main antagonist of Metroid Prime 4 into Super Smash Bros. So not only from Nintendo's perspective would this make a lot of sense, but I'd personally love to see Psylocke included. There definitely seems to be some potential for a unique moveset with Psylocke, and I hope that's fulfilled with an inclusion here. Next up is the Yoshi series, and Kamek is my choice. I feel it would be nice to give Yoshi a natural villain that would obviously have a very unique and interesting moveset. Some may argue that Bowser Jr. or Piranha Plant can already fit in this role as Yoshi's main villain, but come on, that's kind of a stretch. They're also not even under the Yoshi branding in Smash. Poochie could also work as a fun character, but I don't see Nintendo as inclined to pick Poochie, and I would prefer Kamek personally as well. I think that if there is any chance of a new Yoshi character being included, Kamek would probably be the more likely pick, and I'd definitely love to see him. Moving on to the Kirby series, and this one's pretty easy. Bandana Waddle Dee is my pick. Waddle Dees appear in so many Kirby games and is very highly requested from fans. The moveset would be very unique compared to the other Kirby characters, and I think it's about time that we get a new rep for this series. I'd love to see Bandana Waddle Dee join the roster. Next up for the Star Fox series, we're going with Crystal, a very highly requested character from Star Fox Adventures, and would definitely be more unique from the other Star Fox characters currently in the game in terms of her playstyle. I see many fans requesting for Slippy to be included, and yes, I would love to see Slippy as well, but I feel his moveset would still kind of be similar to the current Star Fox characters that we have in the game, and one of the main things that I want out of this is for us to have some more unique picks. This is why I prefer Crystal personally, and I also think Nintendo would be more inclined to pick Crystal, considering that they gave her an assist trophy position in Smash Ultimate. Moving on to a big one here. This is the Pokemon franchise. Oh my, yes, there are so many options for this one. I'd be down for almost any choice from a generation that doesn't currently have a fighter, just for some variety. And since there's no remaining standout screaming at me that fits this criteria, I'll go for more of a unique pick. Grovyle. Now wait, hear me out on this one. Grovyle is a fast and powerful grass-type Pokemon from the Hoenn region in Gen 3. Many fans have wanted a Fire, Water, Grass core to be completed with the solo starter reps in Smash. We have Greninja and Cineroar and a grass type that's needed to fill this out. We can go with Rillaboom from Gen 8, who could work but doesn't scream to be the most fun and unique character to play to me. We could also go with Superior from Gen 5, who would be tough to implement to say the least. And lastly, you have a Gen 3 grass type starter being Sceptile, who you could go with for a fully evolved option, but Grovyle being included would be a lot better in my opinion, even though I do love Sceptile as well. This is because Grovyle could act as the Pokemon series' first real representative from the Mystery Dungeon games. This would, in a way, open up a whole new sub-series to Smash, allowing for a stage and many fantastic music tracks to be included from games like Red Rescue Team, and of course, Explorers of Sky. Now we could obviously go with another Mystery Dungeon rep for this like Dusknoir or something, but Grovyle checks other boxes that Dusknoir fails to, and I'd say would be more recognizable to a general audience. That would be my one pick for a new Pokemon fighter, but in terms of Nintendo's pick, they'd probably pick a Pokemon from Generation 8. Gotta make that money and sell the DLC. Now unfortunately I had to use this series as my example before as one that won't get a new rep, and I highly doubt that it will, considering that they don't want to bring Mother 3 over and localize it, so they're surely not going to be making a new game in the series, right? As much as I'd honestly love to see one. Now, Nintendo is a common choice for a new Earthbound character from fans, but do we really need 3 characters from this series who all have similar movesets? I don't think so. Let's change it up a bit with Porky. But he's too big, I hear you screaming. I'm sorry, but my friend here would like to discuss that with you. Porky would obviously have a much more unique moveset compared to Ness and Lucas, and while I don't think he would be as likely from Nintendo's perspective as Nintendo is, this is my choice, and I'd like to see him in. Moving on to the FZero franchise. My pick for FZero is Black Shadow. He could be a fun inclusion in an Echo Fighter role for Captain Falcon with some changes. Now Ganondorf and Falcon are still kinda similar, so I hesitated on the Echo Fighter pick for the FZero franchise, but in terms of recognizability, there aren't too many characters from this franchise due to, oh, I don't know, how about the over 15-year length of time since the series' previous installment? FZero desperately needs a new game, and if we're not going to get one, I think from the current cast of characters, Black Shadow would probably be a good pick for Smash. Moving on to Fire Emblem, my pick for this series that's, again, very underrepresented is Lyn. Now I considered Hector for this video because I know many Fire Emblem fans would like a villain to be included as a nice contrast to all of the protagonists that we currently have, but he's mainly a slow axe user and not being the most interesting, unlike Lyn, who could be a fun and fast striker. She's one of the most popular characters as well. Trust me, there are many characters that I considered for this. Anna was one that I considered in the same vein, but Lyn, she just had to be my pick. Moving on to the Kid Icarus franchise, where Viridi is my pick here. Now Medusa is also possible as a new Kid Icarus character, but kinda suffers from the Ridley problem to a little more of an extreme extent, and Viridi already plays a more prominent role in Smash, and I think more people in the Kid Icarus fanbase would enjoy seeing her in. Next up is Wario, and this one was pretty obvious to me. Ashley is a very popular character from the WarioWare games, and is highly requested from fans of the series to join the battle in Smash. Her moveset would be very unique, and I think Nintendo would be keen on picking her as well. She's my pick for this series. Let's move on to Metal Gear, and my pick for a new rep would be Big Boss. Being a prominent antagonist in the series who changes from Snake's leader to a member of a villainous organization is a great twist, and a great character is a natural villain for Snake to fight in Smash. The movesets would be slightly similar, but would have their own unique differences, so this might be a semi-clone treatment. Moving on, we have the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Now this may be the series that has struggled the most, coming up with just one character to pick from. There's so many great options, and I could probably make a whole episode of Smash Concept on each of the characters that I'm about to name drop here, but if I'm picking just one, I'm going to go with Tails. Now Shadow is a very popular request, but this comes with an idea of him being an Echo Fighter. As I mentioned earlier, I enjoy the fact that Echo Fighters are a thing, but I do prefer more original fighters when there comes to be a tiebreaker. Shadow is definitely the most likely in my opinion from a perspective of actually getting in, because he would take the role as an Echo Fighter. But in terms of my personal preference, I'd go with the original fighter that's also very popular with fans, being Tails. Knuckles and Dr. Eggman are also options that I strongly considered, and they offer vastly different playstyles from Sonic, but in the end I went with Tails. I'd be overjoyed with any new Sonic representative, to be honest, and I really encourage you to let me know in the comment section down below which one of these characters you would personally go with, since I struggled so much making my decision. Moving on to the Pikmin franchise, where my pick is Alf. This one was pretty easy. He's already a current palette swap for Olimar, but they could potentially be made into Echo Fighters to play a little bit differently. Maybe give Alf different Pikmin compared to Olimar, have him specialize in a specific type of Pikmin. I think Nintendo is also very likely to add him too. Now for Animal Crossing, I had to go with a natural villain for the franchise. This is the dreaded Tom Nook. Definitely the third most prominent character in the series, right behind your playable villager character and Isabelle. Tom Nook, as well as Timmy and Tommy, take a very prominent role in New Horizons, where they want your bells at all cost. There are many creative liberties that can be taken with Animal Crossing characters, since there isn't really fighting in the series, and I hope that Tom Nook plays differently from the other two Animal Crossing reps that admittedly have a pretty similar playstyle to one another. Moving on to Megaman, and my pick is Dr. Wily. Okay, I get some of you may be questioning this, but what if he used some of the popular enemies in the franchise as basis for his attacks? The Big Eyes, the Sniper Joes, the Metals. There are so many options for unique attacks, and it would provide a villain for the franchise that would be a great contrast to Mega Man, rather than using some other popular characters that would play very similarly, and you'd also have a pretty popular character included from the series as well. Let's move on to Punchout. Now I see a lot of people campaigning for Doc Lewis to be included here, but I don't really think that would make sense, since he's not an actual fighter in Punchout and just the trainer for Little Mac. Now Mike Tyson would be a fun idea, but I don't think Nintendo would be able to pull that off, considering the strained relationship that they seem to have right now. I'd also like to stray away from some of the more controversial characters in the series, so well man, we're kind of running out of ideas here. I decided to go with King Hippo, since he provides a heavy character to the roster and a natural villain for Little Mac. And if he's made to be a very large character in stature in the game like he is in Punch-Out, it would provide a nice contrast to Little Mac and emphasize that he's very short, calling back to one of the main mechanics of the Punch-Out gameplay. Moving on to Pac-Man, and this is one of those series that I could have put in the category of not really a series that would have many characters that I could consider for the roster, but it's Pac-Man. It's so iconic. I just had to talk about it here. I decided to go with Miss Pac-Man as an Echo Fighter, and she's probably the most likely from Nintendo's perspective. Maybe a Ghost could be included, but that's stretching it a little bit. I find it hard to determine a moveset that would work well for a Ghost in Smash. Let's move on to Xenoblade, and there are a couple of interesting picks here. By far, without a doubt, the most likely character to be included from the Xenoblade franchise, and is likely going to be included as DLC, this is Rex, potentially with Pyra as the Blade. This is probably the best choice as well, coming from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, one of the most successful games in the franchise. But another character I would like to see is Elma. Elma not being the protagonist of Xenoblade Chronicles X, but being probably the main character from that game outside of your avatar. One of the main reasons I'd like to see Elma is because not only does she have, well, I can't really talk about that, can I? Xenoblade fans know what I'm talking about. But she could potentially get in the Skell, which is a gigantic robotic form, and transform and move around the stage, and it would definitely be a more unique addition to the roster, differentiating her a little bit more from Shulk. I'd honestly be ecstatic if Elma or Rex got into Smash. I'll go with Rex as my official pick, but Elma is a very, very close second. Let's move on to the Street Fighter franchise. And yeah, you guys probably saw this one coming. Chun-Li is my pick for this spot. After Ryu and Ken, she's probably the next most popular fighter from the franchise, and her moveset would actually be pretty varied compared to them because of their similar fighting style, which she does not have, so it would make a lot of sense and a lot of people would want to see her in. Moving on to Final Fantasy, and there are a ton of characters to include from this franchise. I know a lot of people want to see another character from Final Fantasy VII like Sephiroth, for example, and he would be an admittedly pretty good pick, but I'd like to give some more representation to the rest of the franchise. This is why Black Mage is my pick for this spot. He seems like a fun pick and is extremely recognizable, meaning that Nintendo would probably be likely to choose him. He also makes the rosters of a lot of these Smash fan games like Super Smash Flash, for example, so there's clearly a lot of fan support for him to be included. Moving on to Bayonetta. When we first got Bayonetta included in Smash 4 as the last DLC character, isn't the first thing that came to your mind, we want another character like this one? No? Just me? Okay. Rodin is a pretty popular character from Bayonetta and is playable at points, which allows players to get further attached to him. It makes sense to include a character like this in Smash for the fans of the series, and I think is a pretty likely pick from Nintendo's perspective as well. I'm going with him as my choice. Moving on to Splatoon. I decided to go with Octolings as an Echo Fighter / semi-clone to Inklings, and the reason that I say potentially semi-clone is because they could simply use other weapons from Splatoon to differentiate them from the Inklings if you don't want the full-on Echo treatment. Moving on to Castlevania. My pick for this, and is actually one that Nintendo considered as well, is Alucard. Sakurai considered him because of his recognizability, and he would definitely have a very unique moveset, but Sakurai figured that fans would probably prefer the Belmonts to be included, Simon and Richter, and I think it was a good call to include both of them, but Alucard would definitely be the next character who should be included from this franchise. Moving on to Persona, and I didn't want to have to include another character from Persona 5 like Joker, so let's go with Yu Narukami, the protagonist of Persona 4. The series did gain a lot of popularity with 4, so it would make sense to be giving this protag a roster spot. Some would complain about his primary weapon obviously being a sword, but the moveset could obviously be made more unique with other aspects from the game being included in it. Let's move on to Dragon Quest, and yes, I know this character may not be the option that all of you are thinking of, but my pick is Slime. Sakurai has gone on record stating that he wanted Hero from the very beginning to be included as the Dragon Quest rep in Smash, but would not have been opposed to Slime if requested by Square Enix. And this gives me an idea in my head that Slime could have potentially had a very unique moveset, and is generating some curiosity as to what that would have been. This is one of the main reasons that I'd like to see Slime, and since there's a bunch of protagonists from Dragon Quest included as the hero character, I wouldn't really like to see another protagonist included. In terms of likelihood, I'd probably say that Slime is near the top of the characters on the list, considering that he was already considered by Sakurai. Let's move on to the BanjoKazooie franchise. To me, Gruntilda makes the most sense, since she's the main villain of the series and is a Wicked Witch, would certainly have a more unique moveset as a contrast to Banjo and Kazooie's set. As you've probably noticed throughout this video, I like to give characters a natural villain to fight, because not only do you have that hero versus villain matchup, which is something that a lot of people have a dream of fulfilling in a fighting game, but the characters often also have contrasting traits that make them fun to fight against one another with, and Gruntilda definitely fits this criteria. It's probably a likely pick from Nintendo's perspective as well, and is definitely my pick. The final franchise that I'm going to be talking about today is Fatal Fury. Well, it seems like one of the more popular characters from the franchise to be included is Mai, but she seems to be off the table, so we've got to think outside of that. Unfortunately, Geese Howard would be my pick here since he has a rivalry with Terry Bogard and is a pretty popular character from the series. And since we can't have Maya included, he's probably the next most popular pick from fans. Nintendo seems to like to please the fans with new characters included in Smash, and if there ever was a new Fatal Fury character, which I doubt, Geese Howard would probably be the pick. Man, that's a lot of fighters. If you're down for it, you could try making a comment with all these series and let me know what fighters from each you'd like to see. I'd love to read through all of your ideas down below. I alluded to my Smash concept series throughout the video, and it's because I really think that you'd enjoy it. So you can check out the most recent episode of that show using the link on the screen right now. I go over characters' movesets and how I think they would work in Smash. If you're interested in more content like this, consider subscribing and ticking the bell icon to ensure that you do not miss new content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.